Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Gitin Daf Dalad to begin 12 lines down at the top of the Yomid, where the Gemara continues explaining and elaborating on this machlekes between Rabba and Rava regarding what is this opening halacha of our Mesechta of saying b'fanei nechtem. Rabba said because they're not bekin lishma, they didn't know this halacha. We need to verify that it was written lishma. So he says, in front of me it was written, in front of me it was signed. Rava holds no. The reason is because of ein edim mitzvah l'kaimai. A guy comes from overseas. We don't know what the document was, and we're not going to be able to verify it in case something happens. So therefore, we have the shliach comes along and he verifies that it's a valid document. The Gemara had explained, according to both of them, really should need to have two edim, but the Gemara actually says really you don't need to have any edim. Rabbanahu da'atzrichu for kim shtaris, or because of the halacha of shlishma, really most of them are bekin and stam safa the dainim b'gemagmiri. So Rabbanan Machmer, so we make b'makam iguna to believe this one guy, the shliach. But the Gemara continues asking on these two different opinions on Rabba and Rava to see if it's a machlekes tanoim. Is it actually the halacha like one of them, not like the other one? And that's why Gemara continues on today's daf. Hashem corresponds by Kazach and Nechazka. Turn to Daf Chaim. Hashem joins today's daf. Something discussed in today's daf are ksiva v'chasima lishma, as we had mentioned regarding Rabba. The Tana of Mishnah holds that it has to be written and signed lishma, and that we finished discussing who is the Tana of Mishnah that requires both ksiva and chasim lishma. The halacha of smuchas umavlois. We have in the beginning of the Mishnah we have a three-year machlokes regarding from where do you have to say b'fanei nechtem. Tanakama says from Medina Sayam, overseas, which Tosfos explained means a makam rachik, far away. Then we have Rabbi Gamliel who says even from that with Rekem Mechager, which is close by, you still have to say b'fanei nechtem. And then you had Rabbi Lazar who says even from Kfar Lud and Lalud, even as mamish what's called mavlois, it's like absorbed in the perimeter of the if you squared it out, still even from there, since it's chutz la'aretz, you have to say b'fanei nechtem. The Gemara discusses from Medina Be'eretz Yisrael, as we'll see, that it would seem to be one of the three cases that the Gemara had said is machlekes between Rabba and Rava. Because if you go from one state to another state in Eretz Yisrael, however you translate the word Medina, but it's a larger area than just a city. And on the one hand, they're bekin lishma, so according to Rabbi, you wouldn't have to say. According to Rava, seemingly you would have to say because it's far away. So you wouldn't have edim to l'kaima, and that we'll see maybe that's not the case. Magmud l'gmunya, the halacha of when you have even one city, but there is separation between the two different cities because they're ruled by different rulers regarding the halacha, as we said in the Mishnah, that you would have to say b'fanei nechtem. And then finally, the Gemara coming to what's called Rabba Isli de Rava. The Gemara ultimately concedes that Rabba, although he says reason because they're not bekin lishma, he also holds to the reasoning of Rava, and that when there's a situation when you don't have edim mitzvah l'kaima, you would also have to say b'fanei nechtem, even if it's not a concern of the halacha of lishma. So we begin the current daf, like we said, daf Dala, 12 lines down. We had mentioned the machlekes, maybe get Medina Sayam tzarich shem b'fanei nechtem, according to Rabba l'fi shein bekin lishma. You have to ensure there was written lishma. According to Rabba l'fi shein mitzvah l'kaima, to authenticate the signatures. So now the Gemara analyzes the Mishnah in light of the machlekes Rabba and Rabba. It's not. We learned in the Mishnah. Rabbi Shloimy he says, after the Tanakama says you have to say b'fanei nechtem from Medina Sayam from overseas, Rabbi Shloimy says, afa maybe min rekem and cheger. Even if you're bringing from Rekem and Cheger, which is nearby to Eretz Yisrael, even from there, even though it's not quote unquote Medina Sayam far away, even from there you have to say b'fanei nechtem. Then we had a third opinion. He said, afilu mikfar ludim lulud. Even from the village of Ludim to Lud, even from there, you have to go ahead and say b'fanei nechtem. Now, V'amar Abaya had explained that these cities that they're adding on, Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer, what are they adding on? They are Bayares Hasmuches LaEretz Yisrael. These are cities that are near Eretz Yisrael. That's the case of Rekem Mechager of Rabbi Gamliel. And then you have Umavloyis B'tchum Eretz Yisrael. Then you have those of Rabbi Eliezer that are even closer, that they're even absorbed within the tchum, in the perimeter. They're just not part of Eretz Yisrael. That's what the skin, and that's what they're talking about, that they're coming to add on to the halacha of still requiring b'fanei nechtem. As the Gemara explains, he says, I saw that place of between Kfar Ludim to Lud, Vahava, and it was at a distance, which were very close to each other. Okay. Now, says the Gemara, Machlal, is the inference like this. The Tanakama, so the Tanakama held, Hani leit tzarich, that these cases, they don't require, meaning, the Tanakama held that the reason why these cities, Rekem, Cheger, Kfar Ludim, don't require B'fanei Nacht, because they're nearby. And Rabbi is coming to add on, no, even if it's nearby, but I agree by Mavlois, when they're literally like sucked into the boundaries, then you wouldn't have to. And Rabbi adds on also Mavlois, even if it's absorbed in the boundaries, since it's literally not part of Eretz Yisrael. Now Rashi just explains, says, what does it mean Mavlois? What does it mean it's sucked up? He says, for example, you have the cities that were the pasuk counts on the eastern part of Eretz Yisrael to be as the boundary. Pasuk says Mamidbar Lamadalad v'savisim lachem legvul kedma. So he says you're going to make for yourself this eastern boundary mechatzar einon begoimer, and it counts there on the boundary many different cities. Now from those cities towards the east is considered chutz la'aretz. Now the thing is, what's interesting, says Rashi, is that there were certain cities that stick out more on the eastern front more than the other cities at a distance of like 4 or 5 parsais. So if you take the road that goes from one to the other, that's the gvul, but the cities that are standing there outside of that path, they're still within what protrudes from the other city on the border. So that's like, it's like, imagine like a U shape, like you have a city on, and then a little bit further south, it's further west. And then you have another city that's further south, but it's further east. So you're making like a V or a U, whatever it is, and whoever lives in that U or V shape is like sucked into like, basically like, it's just that the border goes, it's not necessarily a straight line. So those cities that are inside, they're literally sucked into like the area of Eretz Yisrael. Even that's what Rabbi Elazar holds, that you would have to say, b'fanei nacht. Okay. Now, but one thing says the Gemara, my love, isn't it what the machlokes is that is being discussed over here between the Tanakama and Gamliel is the machlokes of Rabba and Rava. Why is this machlokes Tanam and the machlokes Rabba and Rava? Says the Gemara, I'll explain to you. The Mars of Tanakama held that what's the reason why you have to say b'fanei nacht v'nachtim? L'fishem mikin l'shma, because people don't know the halacha. Now, Bahani, Gemiri, here they're right next to Eretz Yisrael. You have, the environs, B'chol HaGlilis, like they always say, what's around it. They know the halacha. They're well versed. So therefore, they don't have to say b'fanei nechtem. Umar and Rabbi Elazar held, no, because there's no witnesses over there. And V'hani namalei. And even though, as Tais explains, according to Rabbi Elazar, it wouldn't be because it's shchichi, because they have them of lois. It definitely would be. Taisa says, but it's because, as we'll see shortly, Rabbi Elazar holds b'chlal. We don't be machalik. We don't differentiate. Eretz Yisrael, chutz la'aretz, you're out of Eretz Yisrael, you have to say b'fanei nacht. Fine, but at least according to Rabbi Gamliel, the reason would be is because even though you're Rekem Cheger, which is nearby to Eretz Yisrael, but there's like a chayrim, there's like a separation. Eretz Yisrael is very different halachically than chutz la'aretz, and therefore people are not constantly going back and forth. So therefore, that's why you would have to say b'fanei nacht v'nachtim. So seemingly machlokes Tanakama and Rabbi Gamliel is the machlokes between Rabba and Rava. So the Gemara says, "Loi, no, not necessarily. Rabba metaritz letamei. Rabba will answer according to his reasoning. He'll show that all the Tanoim are like his opinion, and Rabba metaritz letamei. And Rabba will answer according to his reasoning, as the Gemara explains. Rabba metaritz letamei. Rabba says, I can tell you that everyone's coming from the halacha of lishma. The kuliyam lefishem. Everyone's saying the reason why you have to say b'fanei nacht because people don't know the halacha of lishma, or like Tay said, they don't agree to the halacha, whatever it is. But what's the machlokes then? Tanakama holds Hani keeping this muchis. These towns, Rekem, Cheger, Kfar Ludim, they're nearby. So make me so they know the halacha. Also, Gamliel comes along to say, he says, no, Mavlois Gemiri, the ones that literally like suck into, like you have those, the non-Jewish neighbors. They know more Yiddishkeit than some people that live out who know. Yeah, they're sucked into the area. They know. But Smuchas like Gemiri, people that are nearby, but the they're not inside. They don't have Jewish neighbors on either side. They're out of the tchum, even though they're nearby, they don't know the halacha. Where ba'asr b'lez that's when Elazar comes along to say, what's the understanding if it's about lishma? Chayra and Mavlois would also know lishma. So that's Rabbi Elazar b'chlal. Mavlois namar lehos no. Even though they know the halacha in Mavlois, they're not excluded from the category of Medina Sayam. Shloi tichalik b'Medina. We don't want to differentiate. If we made a gzeira from Medina Sayam from chutz la'aretz, we don't make any chilukim. So therefore, even though you are like sucked into the area, but you're in chutz la'aretz, so then you have to say b'fanei nacht v'nachtim. So according to Rabbah, everyone agrees it's because of lishma. Question is, do we say that since you're smuchais, that you're going to be mikmeh gemiri, or do you say that no, mavlois gemiri but smuchas and not gemiri, and according to Beleza b'chlal, even though you're gemiri, you know the halacha, we don't want to be mechalik between chutz la'aretz, and we say as long as you're chutz la'aretz, you have to say b'fanei nechtam. That's according to Rabbah. And Rabbah could also say it according to his reasoning. The Kuliyama, everyone holds the fish in the Mekam. The reason why I have to say b'fanei nechtam is because we don't have witnesses. The husband's going to come along and he's going to protest, and what are we going to answer him? We can't find anyone to verify, to authenticate, so we need to have the shliach to say and authenticate originally. So then what's the machlekes? But Tanakama held Hana keeping this mitzvah since these towns are nearby. Okay, mishkashrichi, people come and go, they travel, so therefore we will find someone. Comes along to say, he says, no. Though towns that are mamash tucked in, they're common to be found. Smuchas l'shchichi, but the guys in chutz la'aretz, even though at a distance, even though he's very close, is not so common. Comes along to say, even if your mamash sucked in, we're not going to allow you to not say b'fanei nechtam. That we shouldn't differentiate. So again, the Gemara says not necessarily is the machlekes not Mishnah, machlekes Rab and Rava. Each one could explain that everyone is saying like him. So then the Gemara goes on to the next opinion in the Mishnah to try to bring a raya over there to say, oh, there we'll see the machlekes Rab and Rava. So now we learned in the Mishnah, after these three opinions, we have the Chachamim and the sages. They say, you don't have to say this statement as the shliach bringing the get in front of me is written in front of me a sign. Only if someone brings from overseas to Eretz Yisrael, or the other way, someone brings it from Eretz Yisrael to overseas. Now, machlal, the inference is the Tanakama saver, because this is like a fourth opinion. Sounds like the Tanakama held that Meilech Leitzarach, that if you take it from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz, then you don't have to say it's only from Medina Yam to Eretz Yisrael, because or else that would be the same thing as the Chachamim. Says the Gemara, my love, isn't it? Sounds like, this is the machlekes Tanakama and the Chachamim is the machlekes Rab and Rava. How so? So the Gemara explains. The Mars of a Tanakama held, what's the reason why you have to say b'fanei nechtam is lefish ein bikin lishma? It's because they don't know the halacha of lishma. Overseas, Fayak, they don't know this halacha. So, like Rabbah, that's why they have to say, but as a Gitin Daf and Beis, but Vahani, but those who live in Eretz Yisrael, they are Gemiri. They know the halacha. So they know the halacha, so there's no reason to say b'fanei nechtam. Therefore, the Tanakama says you only say it from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, but not from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz. But in Marsa, the Chachamim held, like Rava, that the reason why you have to say b'fanei nechtam is it's very far away. We don't have Edom coming to, who knows, intercontinental travel. We only have it today's day. People didn't get there. It took months and months and years. We have no one around to authenticate it. So then from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz, you also don't have witnesses to verify. So the Chachamim said, even if you do it the other way too. Seemingly, the machlekes Tanakam, the Chacham, is the machlekes between Rabbah and Rava. So here too, the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. Each one could explain all opinions like him. Rabbah metatz l'tamei, v'Rav metatz l'tamei. Rabbah will explain both opinions according to his understanding of Lishma, and Rav will explain it according to his understanding of L'kaimai. As the Gemara explains. Rabbah metatz l'tamei. Rabbah explains according to his reason. The Kuliyama, yes, everyone holds that the reason why we're saying b'fanei nechtam l'fish in bikin Lishma, because in Chutz La'aretz they don't have halach of Lishma. So what's the machlekes then? Well, if you do it from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz, the machlekes is regarding, do we make a gzeira that if we don't make you say b'fanei nechtam from Eretz Yisrael to Medina Yam, then you might not say it from Medina Yam to Eretz Yisrael? The Tanakama held, like I said in the Malachat maybe. We don't make such a gzeira. Everyone knows in Eretz Yisrael, they know the halacha. Chutz La'aretz they don't know. So why should we make you say from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz? We only make it from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. But the later Rabban and the Chacham, they hold they know. Because we're going to make you say it both ways, because or else you're not going to do it from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. That's how Rabbah explains them according to his understanding. Rabbah answers according to his understanding. The Kulam according to everyone. The reason why you have to say it is because you don't have witnesses to verify. And so wait a second. So what's the understanding of the Tanakama then? So Rav explains no, but Rabbanim Asroy, the later Rabbanim, the Chachamim, lefrushay taima de Tanakama hu de asu. They're only coming to explain what the Tanakama said. Tanakama also holds you have to say before the nechtav with moilech umevi, with bringing and the other direction too. He just picked one of them. And when the Chachamim oimnim, they're just clarifying that what the Tanakama said to say from Medina Sayyam was both ways, and therefore there's no machlokes really, and that's a Rabbi will explain the halacha of the Mishnah. But now the Gemara asks, okay, fine, there's no machlokes tanoim, but if we move on to the next case of the Mishnah, there seems to be a question on Rabbah from this halacha. Tana, we learned in the Mishnah, hamevi get medina lemedina. If you bring from one state to another state, b'medina sayam, overseas, said the Mishnah, you have to say, in front of me was written, in front of me it was signed. So here it gets a little bit technical in what's called the yukim, the inference, about what, and there's two different versions of this. So, says the Gemara, okay, it sounds like Haba'isa Medina. But let's say the same state in overseas. Let's say Spain. In the same state, but just from city to city, sounds like, oh, even though it's B'Medina Sayam, even though it's overseas, not Eretz Yisrael, it sounds like Loy Tzarech, that you wouldn't have to say B'fanei Necht, it's only because it's Medina LeMedina. It's different states in Medina Sayam, different countries, whatever word you want to use. Then you have to say, but if it was the same Medina, even though it's Medina Sayam, it gets confusing. Medina Sayam, Medina means like country. Medina Sayam just means the overseas, meaning it's not Eretz Yisrael. That's the terminology we use. Chutz La'aretz, basically. So it's not in Chutz La'aretz. If it's the same Medina, even from city to city, you wouldn't have to. Now the thing is, Chutz La'aretz did not bekin l'shma, but sounds like since this Eidim Mitzuin L'Kaimai, because it's the same Medina, then you wouldn't have to say B'fanei Nechtav. Wait a second, says the Gemara. L'Rava nicha l'Rabba kasha. That's good according to Rava, because the reason why you tell me you have to say is because there's Eidim Mitzuin L'Kaimai, it's the same Medina. But according to Rava, it's difficult. I don't care if it's the same Medina, but they're not bekin l'shma. It could be next door. You should have to say B'fanei Nechtav. Seems like from the halacha of Mishnah, not like Rabbah. The Gemara actually wonders why. Taisus wonders. He said, "Why are you asking from this? Why can't you ask from the beginning of the Mishnah?" The opening line of our Mishnah said, "Maybe get Medina Sayam." Sounds like only if you bring it from Medina Sayam to Eretz Yisrael. Sounds like, but in Medina Sayam itself, you wouldn't have to say. So it says, no, that wouldn't be a question, because you could say that really in the same Medina Sayam you would have to. We're just saying from Medina Sayam takes good that Rebbe Gamaliel, that he says Rekem Achegi, you don't have to say. Saying no, that's only from Medina Sayam. But Al Kaponim, the Gemara's question on Rabbah seems like a very strong one. Why are you saying only Medina Medina? Seemingly it should be even Isa Medina Sayam. So the Gemara says, no, Loitema, don't say that the way you're reading to infer Medina Sayam Leitzarech, that in that country, in the Medina Sayam, you wouldn't have to say. Not true, that's the wrong diuk. You're supposed to make a different diuk. You're supposed to say, Elaima, Medina Medina Be'eretz Yisrael Leitzarech. See, there's two ways you can make a diuk. Anytime there's inflection or tone, you could, if someone says a sentence about like what are you trying to say to infer otherwise. So when you're saying Medina Medina B'Medina Sayam, you don't have to say. So what are you inferring? So there's two inferences you can make. The Gemara is seemingly assuming that, oh, that means only Medina Leitzarech. But Ba'isa Medina, you don't have to. Well, that's difficult on Rabbah, because why would you not have to say if they're not bekin l'shma? Says Rabbah, no, wrong diuk. Don't be medaik on the words Medina. Be medaik on the words of Medina Sayam to infer, but be'eretz Yisrael leitzarech. So it depends which words are you going to shtel on. Are you going to shtel on the words Medina, or are you going to shtel on the words Medina Sayam? Rav is inferring, oh, the words are Medina, but why is Medina? Sounds like you wouldn't have to. Oh, because there's eight mitzvah lekaima. When the Rav say, no, wrong words. Shtel on the word Medina Sayam, which tells us, yeah, but Eretz Yisrael leitzarech. And that actually is like him, actually not like Rabbah, as we'll see as the next version of the Gemara, because according to Rabbah, you still have to say in Eretz Yisrael. He holds that so you don't have to, because they became Lishma. So he says, wrong diik. Bimadaik that's a diik. Says Gemara, wait a second, that can't be the diik we're supposed to make, like that's what the Mishnah is teaching us to infer this halacha. The Mishnah explicitly already said this halacha. Said in the Mishnah, maybe get Eretz Yisrael. If someone brings a get in Eretz Yisrael, he doesn't have to say b'fanei nechtam. So we already said in the Mishnah this halacha of being again in Eretz Yisrael to say. Why would I have to make this halacha to make the diuk, but in the Eretz Yisrael, Medina, you would not have to say? Says, well, no, imahi, if all I had was that diuk, the inference from the Reisha, Havamim, I would have said, Hanamili di'eved. When did we say this halacha? That in Eretz Yisrael, you don't have to say b'fani nechtab, would only be after the fact, which the way Rashi says it is, that if you bring it from Medina in Eretz Yisrael, and it wasn't written in front of him, you don't have to invalidate the shlichus because of that. But maybe initially, that if we would consult with the rabbis, then loy. They would tell us that no, you should be seeing the writing and the signing, that you should initially say, Kamash Malon, that's what the extra teaching of the Seifa, which that's Machlekes Rashi tells you exactly which one is which one's teaching us this, the ratio of the Seifa, but the Rashi says it's the extra teaching in the Seifa that tells us, that you don't have to. In other words, if all we had was the ratio that said that you don't have to say in Eretz Yisrael, I would have said, okay, maybe that's only like a tchila, maybe that's only the evid after the fact that you don't have to. But like a tchila, maybe you should have to say even Eretz Yisrael. That's why Kamash Malan, that's why it says Rabba, no, that's why you needed to have this diyuk to tell us that, Medina Sayam you have to say. But Medina you don't have to say even as a likat chila. Now, the Gemara says that this questioning that we had could actually be said the other way, as the opposite. The V'ikad Masim Lahachi, which is really the same thing, just in the reverse, because we said you could make this inference from this teaching. We said one way, and now the Gemara is saying it the other way. It sounds like from the Mishnah that you're telling me that Medina LeMedina, Medina Sayam, that you don't have to say B'fani Nachtav, the inference is, the diuk is, but Medina Be'eretz Yisrael, that you wouldn't have to say. Right? It's only in Medina Sayam that you have to say. Sounds like Hamadina Medina Eretz Yisrael Leitzarech. Says the Gemara now the question the other way. L'Rabba Nicha L'Rabba Kasha. It's difficult on Rava because according to Rava, wait a second, who cares Eretz Yisrael? It's Medina, it's far away. So interesting. Rashi has an interesting conversation on this. He says he's bothered by a question that, according to this version of the Gemara, why does the Gemara want to ask from a diuk? From the Reisha, right? This is just a diuk. It's an inference. The Mishnah doesn't say explicitly Medina Eretz Yisrael that you don't have to say. It's because it said Medina Sayam that you have to say. The diuk would be that you that don't have to say in Eretz Yisrael. Well, why wouldn't the Gemara ask from explicit halacha in the Sefer of the Mishnah, which we just brought in the first version? How many get Eretz Yisrael in the Tzarech Leimer? So obviously the reason is because of Lishma. That's Rashi's question. On the Gemara's question, according to the second version, why are you asking from a diuk when the Mishnah explicitly says you bring in Eretz Yisrael, no matter where it sounds like that you? Okay, the Gemara could answer like it's chila, but I'm saying, but why are you asking from a diuk in the Reisha when you could ask from an explicit halacha of the Sefer? Says Rashi very interestingly. He says like this: says the Reisha said explicitly from Medina to Medina, meaning when it was talking about Medina Sayam, it said from Medina Sayam. You have to say, inference being, Medina, Eretz Yisrael, you don't have to say. Now the Seifa doesn't mention Medina. Doesn't say. When it's talking about the halacha of Eretz Yisrael, it doesn't say, when it says, Hamevi get Eretz Yisrael in the Tzarech Leimer, it doesn't say Medina. Right. So that's what I'm saying. That's why I said when you translate Medina, what does Medina mean? It would mean like a totally different area, like Galil and Yehuda. These are different areas in Eretz Yisrael. Yes, it's not necessarily based on municipality or whatever. You have to know how to translate it. Rashi gives like some French word. If you look up the French word, maybe you'll see what the word Medina actually means. But it's like means a totally different, province or whatever this and that. But it's part of Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, Al Capone, it's a different area. Now the thing is that if you would ask from the case of the Sefer, says Rashi, they'd say, Rava, how could you say it's because in Eretz Yisrael, you have one Medina in the north and one Medina in the south. That's like a different area. And you see, you don't have to say, they're not in Mitzvah Mekaimai. So you know what you would answer? You would answer, this is like theory of mind, like Rashi is saying, what you would have answered, you would say That's talking about in that same Medina in Eretz Yisrael. That's what it would mean, because and then the Gemara would ask, wait a second, how could you say it means in the Medina itself, not from Medina to Medina, but then that would mean Medina Sayyam, in that same Medina, that would mean that you do need, that's the Gerson Rashi. But how could that be? How could you Rava hold? If you're saying in Eretz Yisrael, you're saying, if you bring a girl in Eretz Yisrael, you don't have to say Eretz Yisrael. What's Eretz Yisrael different than Chutz La'aretz? According to Rava, it can't be Medina because there's no Eidim to the You would have to answer. It means Ba'is Medina. But then we would have asked you a question and said, then what are you going to do with Medina Zayam? Says Rashi, at the end of the day, you're coming from a diuk. You would have to ask from a diuk anyway. You would ask on your answer of Rava. Rava would answer you and tell you, when I say in the Eretz Yisrael, you don't have to bring you don't have to say B'fanei Nachlav, would mean Ba'is Medina. So then we would ask you on the diuk of that halakha and say, it's Meduik then that in Medina Siyam, because you only say in Eretz Yisrael, would mean that you do have to say, why would you have to say? It's Eid Metuim L'Kaim to say Medina. So it says Rashi, I'm going to end up in the diuk anyway, so therefore there's no point in me going to the Seif, I could just ask from the Reisha. The Reisha anyway is the first halacha. So it's an interesting cheshbon that Rashi goes through to say, what's freaks from that diuk, freak from that mafurish halacha, says that's not mafurish either, it's going to end up by a diuk anyway. So if I'm anyways ending up with their diuk, my way was go to the Reisha already and not wait for the Seif. So it's an interesting cheshbon that Rashi has. But be that as it may, this is the Gemara's question on Rava, again, because it's asking the diuk the other way, how it did from the case of the Reisha. Says the Gemara, here also same type of answer. Loi tema, don't say Medina Eretz Yisrael. The way Rabbi would like you to infer that it's coming to exclude Eretz Yisrael. No, Elaim rather say Haba'isa Medina b'Medina Sayam Leitzarech. Again, the other diuk that we're saying. It's just saying that, however, in the same country, in overseas, you don't have to, because that works for Rabbi, because Rabbi says because of Mitzvah Lekama, it is Mitzvah Lekama, even though they don't know Lishma. Wait a second, says the Gemara, wait a second. Okay, are you telling me I'm Medina be'Eretz Yisrael? That's what you want to tell me. What would the halacha be? Then tzarech, right? That's what Rava needs, right? Seemingly Rava needs, even Eretz Yisrael, Medina, to have to say b'fanei nachtav, because even though it's Eretz Yisrael, okay, grace to Talmidei Chacham, they know Lishma, there's still no Eidim Mitzvah L'Kaimai. That's what Rava wants. That's why he doesn't want you to make this diuk of Rabba. He wants you to make his diuk of Ba'is Medina, but in Eretz Yisrael you would need. So, listening, then the Gemara has the obvious question, says, wait a second. Then why are you saying, if you're bringing from Medina, why is the halacha of the Mishnah say, if you bring a get from Medina, that's Hayam? You have to say, why are you saying the words Medina Sayam? Listening, Hamev Medina Stam. That's country to country. Why are you throwing me off, adding on this variable Medina Sayam? Nothing to do with Medina Sayam. Anywhere, even there at Israel, you have to say, because it's not Mitzvah L'Kaimai. Why are you saying Medina Sayam? Says the Gemara, the truth is, Medina be'Eretz Yisrael, you're right. Like the diuk that Rabbi made, Nami loy tzarech. It's a good diuk that you make it, because why would the Mishnah say the words Medina Siyam? Must be, it's only Medina Siyam. And that in Eretz Yisrael, says Rabbi, is a correct diuk, that, like Rabbi wants to say, in Eretz Yisrael you would not have to say. So wait a second, that's difficult on Rabbi. Rabbi holds when there's no Eidim between the Kaimai, you have to say. Why in Eretz Yisrael, Medina, would you not have to say? Because the Kiv and the Ikka Oile Regalim, since there are people, when 3 times a year, everyone makes pilgrimages to the Beis HaMikdash, so Mishkach Shchichi, so it's common to have Eidim to be able to verify the document. Because even though you live in a different Medina in Eretz Yisrael, you live in a whole different area in the north, Malchi Yisrael, and they're from the Malchi Yehuda and Judea, whatever it is, Mary, and all the different things, doesn't make a difference. Everyone's coming together on the shoulder Shugalim, so everyone will know each other, and they'll have Aiden to be Mitzvah L'Kamei. So Rashi just points out, must be, and the Gemara is only going to mention this later, as both Rashi and Tais explain this, but this that we had said in the beginning of the Sugya, on the Beis, that one of the 3 differences between Rabba and Rava is Medina L'Medina be'Eretz Yisrael, is not true anymore, and you have to delete that, because that's not a case. That's a difference. Because we thought that would be a case that Rabbi holds, you would have to say before the Nachtav. It's not true. Rabbi agrees, and this is the deal we made from the Mishnah, that you would not have to say, why not? Because it is Matur L'Kaimai. How's that possible? It's Medina. Yeah, because everyone's Oil L'Regel, and therefore everybody will be able to go ahead and verify it. Now, today has an interesting conversation regarding the halacha of Macha. The halacha of Macha is that when you do a protest, and like the Gemara discussed in Baba Basra and Cheskes Abatim, we say generally Yehuda, the area of Judea near Yerushalayim and Galilee, are considered like Shas Chayim, and it's not considered Macha, because people will not hear about it. So how is it different than Edom? So it says Taisus, he says there's a fundamental difference between that of the halacha of Macha and over here regarding finding Edom. By Macha, a guy's not looking to hear someone's protesting on his Ming and Chazaka in the field. So he won't hear about it. But by the Edus, you're looking for Edom, you'll be able to find Edom because people are Mitzuin Lekam, people come to the base of Mikdash, people are Oil Regel, and therefore that's why it's a different halacha. And he also discussed it regarding the halacha of the city of Mechayza that we'll see on the Avav, that also, like if you're looking for witnesses, then you'll find that people, like people tell each other, and okay, actually there by Macha he differentiates, he says the other way around. He says Macha works in Mechayza, but it doesn't work before the Nechta, you'll have to before Nechta by Mechayza, because he says that by Macha people start talking. He said, you heard this guy said it's not his field, and it's that, a good piece of juicy news, but regarding Kiyim, the Edom that were there, that know that they might not be around when you need them. So then you'll have to say before the Nechta. There are different types of halachas. But says the Gemara, wait a second, the answer you just gave, Rava, to tell me why it's Edom Mitzuin L'Kaimai, even Medina Be'eretz because of Oil Regel, will tenech Bezman Beis HaMikdash Kaim. That's very well for when the Beis HaMikdash was around. Bezman Beis HaMikdash Kaim, when the Beis HaMikdash is not around, Michael, what are you going to say? Why is this halacha still Medina Be'eretz Yisrael? You don't have to say, but people don't get together anymore. There's no more Beis HaMikdash that brings us together. Says the Gemara, no. Since Ezra HaSefer instituted that Mondays and Thursdays, that's related to what we lane on Thursdays and Mondays, related, as the Gemara says about B'kama Daf Pei Beis Amud Aleph, that there are courts that are established throughout Eretz Yisrael. So Mishkach Shchichi, so it's common, meaning there's caravans that are traveling and go from one places to another place to get judgments, to hear the court's rulings, and therefore people do gather, and people will come, because they're going to have these cases that they're going to have throughout Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, it is shchichi to have Edom Mitzuin L'Kaimai, even though you have people in Yehuda, you have people in the Galilee. You'll know, even Medina, the Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, that takes care of that part of the Mishnah. That's not difficult on, not Rabba or Rava, as we said, the two different versions we had asked from this halacha. The Gemara is basically going through the Mishnah and trying to see how it fits with both Rabba and Rava. Is it Kitanoi? Is the Machlekes Tanoim the Machlekes Rabba and Rava? Is this statement in the Mishnah difficult on Rabba or difficult on Rava? Now we're moving on to the next halacha of the Mishnah. Mishnah said that's not. He says afilim hagmun lagmunya. Even from one neighborhood to another neighborhood, which, as the Gemara explained, he says there was a city in Eretz Yisrael. His name was Asasius. There were these two ruling parties that they were very particular one on the other. That the people from this Hagmunya should not go to that Hagmunya, which basically in one city was split down the middle of one state, and they can't go from one to the other. Therefore, they had to say even from one neighbor to another one, because they couldn't even travel from one to the next. Says Gemara, wait a second. According to Rava, this halacha makes sense, because even though it's literally one city, but since it was divided into two jurisdictions, so no one's gonna know it because no one travels. This is by the Russians, this is by the West, and this is like you can't. There's no travel. So if someone happens to send the get, there's not going to be Edom Mitzuin L'Kaimai. But according to Rabbah, well, that's difficult because it's Eretz Yisrael and the Bekin L'Shema. And still, you see, because of Lo Shchich L'Kaimai, they required you to say before Nechtam, as we see this opinion of Shimon ben Gamliel. Says the Gemara, Rabbah Islay the Rava. Rabbah holds of Rava, meaning when you're going from Medina to Medina Be'eretz Yisrael, where they're makpid, and there's no witnesses that are common in the other Medina, or even in the same neighborhood, like we have Agmun, you would have to say B'fonei Nechtav. But Rashi points out, Rava does not hold like Rabba. So if there's Eidim that are frequent, we're not concerned for even Medina Zayam that they're not Bakiin, because everyone is Baki in the halacha of Lishma, and therefore that is why the halacha of Shimon Gamliel says you would have to say even from Agmun like Munya in Eretz Yisrael, because Rabba agrees to Rabba. He just holds also this halacha of Lishma. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, Ella, my benayu. So then what is the difference between them? So as Rashi explains, it's really going back on the last two answers that the Gemara gave. The Gemara's first answer we gave before was, since, and Taisa says this, Rashi explains it in different words, that we said, since there's Oile Regalim, so we said that, that's why Medina Eretz Yisrael, even according to Rava, you wouldn't have to say. So wait a second, that means to say that even Rava agrees that you wouldn't have to say for Medina Eretz Yisrael. And also on this last answer we just gave, that Rabba agrees that where the two towns are particular, they're makbid. He agrees that you have to be mekayim. So if that's the case of Medina Eretz Yisrael cannot be a case that we have machlekes Rabba and Rava, because as Rashi explains, if they're makbid, so Rabba agrees that there's no witnesses, and he holds up Rabba's reasoning that you would have to say. If they're not makbid, so then Rava agrees, because in Eretz Yisrael they are shchich l'kaim, because you have the establishment of the courts, that people travel to all the different courts. So what's the difference between them? In other words, we're missing from the reasonings that we had explained is the nafkemina of the machlekes and of beis and beis. So the Gemara answers, you're right. Definitely there is missing, and you have to delete one of them, but you still remain with two of the three reasonings. We're missing the case of Medina Eretz Yisrael, but says the Gemara, the difference between them is the asur beitrei. If two people bring it from Medina Sayam, which that we said, according to obviously Rabba, you would have to say because they're not Bekin Lishma. According to Rabba, you wouldn't have to say because you have two witnesses who brought it, who they're the Eidim themselves. Rashi says what it is. According to Rashi, it sounds like we're going to hold on to them, but they'll be Mitzvah L'Kaim. According to Taisus, we're going to hold on to them. They say we were Shluchim either way. Or Inami, or the other case is Ba'is Medina Ziyam. In the same Medina Ziyam, according to Rabba, you don't have to say because Mitzvah L'Kaim. According to Rabba, you would have to say because of they're not Bekin Lishma. So therefore, that would be the therefore, like Taisa explains previously, we didn't mention this question because we could still say the second half of this, like the way Rashi describes it. It's only when you have both the answers the Gemara gave that Rabba agrees to Rabba in the case of Medina Eretz Yisrael, and Rabba agrees to Rabba in the case when they're makbid. So then that we lost that case of Medina Eretz Yisrael, and we only remain with those other two cases. That's the nafka between Rabba and Rabba. Thank you to any time for hosting us.